European Parliament. The floor is yours. Thank you. First of all, I would like to thank the speakers of the previous panel. I hope we will be as interesting as they were. Of course, we will touch upon other aspects. My colleague Kosma Zlotowski, who is also from the European Parliament, and I'm very happy to see him here, despite the fact that some airlines were on strike, and we, of course, had difficulty coming back from Strasbourg. Speaking about the fragmentation of social dumping and the fragmentation of the single market, I believe this is a real challenge for the European Union, and this is my slogan for this speech. Does it mean that we are going to have a fragmented EU market? Are we going to overcome these challenges posed by social dumping, and are we going to reach good results in the end? We don't know it yet. If we talk about the cornerstones of the European Union, then we have all heard about the 4 freedoms of the EU: free movement of goods, services, persons, and capital. And if we think about these things, and I believe most of this audience has given a thought to these issues, then we know that the free movement of goods, it's working well. The same goes for the free movement of capital. It also works well, not only in the banking sector, but also in other related sectors like fast credits and so on. However, if we speak about the free movement of persons, in words, everything is all right, but on the other hand, there are certain traits that people want to restrict this area. And of course, there are problems also in free movement of services. During the previous discussion, the Service Directive was mentioned, and this is also one of the problematic areas. The Service Directive is based on the principle of origin, and you also saw the divisions between member states with relation to this directive. But that doesn't mean that we have to be angry. However, we need to find argumentation why we shouldn't continue working or talking about this arguments related to social dumping, because I believe that this will lead to fragmentation of the single market. What is social dumping? I will be very brief on this because we saw this clash of definitions during the previous panels. But it is clear that classical dumping has been taken from other areas like production costs or selling the goods below production costs. It simply doesn't work, because I think it would be the case. If it would be the case, then people would simply not refuse going to work in other countries. The fight against social dumping, what is the aim? I would also like to quote Mr. Jean-Claude Juncker, but maybe a different quote. This was said by Jean-Claude Juncker in September this year, and he said that the main of these principles should be the same pay for the same work on the in the same place. Then what to do with workers from other countries if we follow the thesis of Mr. Jean-Claude Juncker? What do we do with bankers working in Riga or Tallinn? Bankers coming from Scandinavia? Does it mean that if they receive the salary that they do receive now, salary allowances and so on and so forth, and the variable costs that Mr. Benny already mentioned, so this worker from Scandinavia, this bank employee from Scandinavia has come to work in Riga, and he receives a bigger salary in Riga. So what would that mean? Does it mean that the tax administration would have to impose some additional taxes or some fines or sanctions against those foreign employees who are working on our market? So this could be one of the solutions. I don't know which would be the right solution. My colleague from France, Ms. Karima Deli, once said that everybody agrees that there is a problem with social dumping in the area of transport, and now it's the right time to introduce a minimum EU wage. First of all, not in all EU countries there is an official minimum wage. This is one thing, but if we look at this graph, then in Bulgaria this minimum wage would be 215 euros. In Luxembourg it's 1,923 euros. So this is an enormous difference. So no matter where you would put this, the EU minimum average, whether it would be at the level of Poland with 417 or Estonia 430 euros, you cannot solve this problem because this would not stop the free movement of labor or the willingness to earn more, or it will not put an end to populism. And it will not put an end to hearing things like we will protect our market from people who would want to come in and who would be ready to work for less money. In September, the European Parliament approved an own initiative report, which was also mentioned by Mr. Benio, and requiring, among other things, that the member states set minimum income at the level of at least 60% of the average wage. So this could restrict the movement of social dumping. But if we look at what it means, what the average wages are in these countries, so in Denmark, it is the average wage is a bit bigger than in Luxembourg, but Bulgaria is still the same. So no matter where you draw these 60%, it doesn't solve the problem either, in essence. And I think this also serves as a good argument fighting against this trivial solution to the problem, where, in my opinion, the most important thing is to protect the working places in the respective member states. But I believe many countries are opposed to this out of competition reasons. And I also have some arguments about the openness and closing down societies. So how far can we go in different leveling campaigns? It is clear that in Eastern Europe the leveling will be smaller, and how far are we going to see dumping in production? One of the speakers already said that social dumping is kind of transferred to dumping of goods, but nobody talks about it on the political level. In France or Germany, you don't speak about that because, of course, if a French company goes and produces its goods somewhere in Latvia or other Eastern European country, then it is not as loudly spoken about, because the impact is not so great on the local labor market. The investment plan of Mr. Juncker if we take into consideration the more than 100 millions of euros, you see where this money is basically located. It's basically in the old member states. Does that surprise you? No, it doesn't, because of course there is a willingness to earn money, and if you want to earn a lot of money, for instance, for insurers, for other companies, you would go to countries where the GDP is greater, where you would go to a country with more population. You need to have guarantees that you will be able to profit from, for instance, toll roads. And you would most probably not choose a peripheral country or a country with a very scarce population. And that's why maybe you might wonder about the Juncker plan. What about the designers of this plan? Was their aim to concentrate this money in the old member states? the Juncker plan has been prolonged, and in the years to come, you will most probably see that as a result, the gap between Eastern member states and Western member states of the European Union will have grown even more. And this would be like an invitation to the younger generations of Eastern European countries to move to Western Europe. Talking about the real risks of social dumping, I think very often social dumping is like the Trojan horse for competition and the real single market, especially if we talk about the services market. I'd like to quote Mr. Juncker again about this equal pay, but I believe that it would be most importantly to make sure that in the single market the same rules are equally attributed to the same services and providers. I think we have seen many failures here because Latvian car repairs will not succeed in France or in the United Kingdom because the rules are simply disproportionate. So I believe this is far more important than the first thing that Juncker has mentioned. On the political aspect, in gas context, we know that that in Germany, the purchase price for the same gas that we are using in Latvia or in Poland is cheaper by approximately 1/3, even though Germany is located much further away from this source of the gas. So can we say that the goods produced in Germany, like chemical products in Germany, are dumped because they are sold for dumping prices in Latvia or in Poland? So should we introduce a tariff for them, for the German chemical goods, because they receive a dumping price, which is actually not based on the real economics. It is based on agreements with Russia, which have very little to do with economics. Mr. Darvish mentioned the example about moving production from the European Union to Asia. In this case, nobody talks about social dumping, which it actually is. Capital dumping. We could also introduce this term in the free market. For instance, if a Dutch farmer or a Danish farmer wants to buy land in Latvia, and they do, so we know that there is a problem about the price of land in Latvia. In the single market, you have to allow farmers from other member states to buy arable land in your territory. The Dutch farmer receives approximately 7 times more in area payments than in Latvia, and taking into consideration the fact that this Dutch farmer can access capital more easily than the Latvian farmer, then that would be social dumping as well. So maybe this is a surprise for somebody, but I would like to turn to politicians. So when we go and talk about all these aspects, and when you talk about the social dumping and the free movement of persons, you shouldn't be afraid to mention these examples, because we need to foster the single market and its every aspect. The same goes for capital market, the free movement of goods. Let's mention the facts that put our farmers into a discriminatory situation as opposed to farmers from other Western European countries. About the transport sector, I think Mr. Kosmas Latovskis will also speak about that. There I would like to mention a legislative act passed by Germany and France. And I would like to mention the law in France, which came into effect this summer in July. Most probably it can be related to the elections. And the principle of these two laws has a very negative impact on the transport sector. We do not know what the future consequences would be. And this means that the minimum hour wage has to be ensured for all road carriers. It will have a very grave impact on road carriers, and those new restrictions that will be imposed will have a bad impact on the single market. It is not effective to drive without cargo, and it is not effective if you cross the borders without carrying any cargo. This is also to the detriment of the environment. The requirements of France and Germany do not give an answer to the question whether Belgian road carriers, where the minimum wage per hour is higher, will be punished if they fail to pay French salaries in France. Then there is also a ban for drivers to sleep in the cabins of their trucks in Belgium and France. But we must say that in the places where these drivers are allowed to sleep, the places, the parking lots are not safe for drivers. So there are not only additional costs, but also the drivers have to choose which of the norms they will most probably breach in order to survive. And we can say that the Belgians and French are most definitely not taking care of drivers from Latvia, Bulgaria, and so on and so forth. The trade unions are very shocked about the fact that in the port of Antwerp, Portuguese drivers come and they take away the cargoes. And I already mentioned this example in the beginning of the conference. I think the result for transport sector is very clear. Transport sector, which is mobile by definition, means that there should be no talk of different rules in different states in a single market. Here we talk about very mobile actors of the market. And I think if we don't try to solve these problems, then very soon we could arrive at a situation where we try to distinguish pilots by nationality. We know that in the Air Baltic company, the pilots are paid by a Cypriot company, which is, of course, also the European Union. So the requirement would be that each airline should have like a hub regulation or a hub place where all the costs should be related to one specific country. But why should we care about such rules if there is a single sky agreement, if there is a single market? I think if we have a free aviation market, then why should the social regulations of certain airports be regarded as part of regulation of a specific member state? We also know about tax havens, but I don't think this is the right way to solve these problems.
Well, there are two more examples which are quite recent, and the Polish government decided to order helicopters from the US-based company, which is located in Poland, and as a result, France's reaction was quite vigorous, and they said that they would protect their interests. I see that my Polish colleagues tend not to agree with me, but yeah, okay, I will be open for your further comments, but I believe that France's reaction was quite inadequate in this situation, and I believe that Polish government acted correctly because they tried to protect their jobs. Then about the introduced payment for passenger cars, where Jean-Claude Juncker has managed to arrive to a compromise with the German minister, received the blessing just before the Congress of the Christian Democrats. Well, so we can draw our own conclusions in this. Well, taking into account what's happening globally with the newly elected president of the U.S. and his stance with the TTIP and his stance with the relationships with the Caribbean countries and Europe, and taking into account other developments in the world, I believe that the openness is challenged, and that promotes to close the doors, because we see the trend to grab the power, and as a result we are losing our competitiveness and welfare in the long term, because we can see that people are fighting, fiercely fighting back the competition from outside with all possible means. And finally, well, the current definition of the social dumping is used to limit the competition, and all other aspects are subordinated to this. And then if we speak about the road transport, I believe it's very important to understand whether the transport workers are really subject to this directive for posted workers, or probably they should be exempt from it. Thank you.